Here is what I believe to be the largest 4:3 aspect ratio LCD TV ever sold, at least on the consumer market. And you may think that doesn't look that big. And you're right, it's 20 inches, which is positively tiny by comparison to modern TVs, and even compared to many old CRT TVs. But these were only on the market for a brief window of time from the mid to late 2000s, because by the time LCD TVs started becoming affordable, the marketplace demand for widescreen TVs started rapidly increasing.
4:3 aspect ratio, 16:9, the difference in between, that's where the monsters live!
But for those couple of years, these 20-inch 4:3 aspect ratio LCD TVs were quite common, and they were probably sold under dozens of different models, all with very similar designs and features. But this one is a little bit special because it has a couple features that you don't normally see on these TVs, and that's why I decided to pick it up at the thrift store, where I found it for $20. This one is an Olivia LT20S, or actually it has an umlaut on the O, so I think you're supposed to say Olivia. It was made by Syntax in Taiwan in July 2005. The reason why this one is a little bit unique compared to most of the ones you see, first of all, the LCD has a glossy finish on it instead of matte. And also, the speakers on the sides are not quite as wide as many of the other ones. I think they tried to fool people into thinking it was a widescreen TV by making the speakers extra wide. So I like this one because it's more compact on the sides. At first glance, the back is rather nondescript, except for these bulges, which are the speaker cabinets, to give them better acoustic response. But if I go handheld for a moment, I can show you some of the nice things this TV has. First of all, the power supply is built in, so it takes a standard IEC power cord, and it has a hardware on-off switch, which you don't normally see anymore on TVs. Then we can see the plethora of inputs. Antenna input, unfortunately that's only analog TV tuner. This does not have a digital TV tuner. Many of the later ones did, but this one does not. Then you can see we have two sets of composite video inputs with stereo audio. One of them is shared with an S-video input. Then over here is a component video input with its associated stereo audio input. And this does support progressive scan. And on the side here it has a VGA input for connecting it to a computer, an associated stereo audio input, 3.5mm, and a stereo headphone jack, which works with all the modes. So anything you're watching on the TV, you can plug in headphones and listen to it that way. And most of these 20-inch 4:3 aspect ratio LCD TVs from the mid to late 2000s only had a 640x480 resolution LCD panel. And if you've ever seen one of those, you know how grainy the image looks in person. But this one is a little bit nicer because it has an 800x600 resolution LCD panel. And that definitely does make an improvement. I didn't get it with the original remote, but $10 on eBay, and I got the remote for it. And yes, the remote control does glow in the dark. But even if you don't have the remote, you can still access most of the functions through the buttons on the front panel. And we can go through the different inputs. TV is the analog TV tuner. PC is the VGA input. Video 1 and Video 2 are those video inputs. Video 1 is shared between S-Video and Composite. Video 2 is Composite only. And finally, the component video input. And we can go through the menu here. And as the typical settings, brightness, contrast. The backlight you can set to soft, normal, or bright. I see almost no difference between normal and bright, but soft is noticeably darker. Color temperature, warm, cool, or normal. Saturation, hue, sharpness, and so on and so forth. Audio, you get adjustable bass and treble, and you definitely want to turn those up to get better sound quality. You get a balance control for left to right. And setup, you have your auto channel scan for the TV tuner. You can turn on caption decoding as a sleep mode, and this does support MTS stereo through the TV tuner, although that's not really useful anymore now that there's no longer any analog TV. So let's hook up some video sources to this thing and give you an example of the picture quality and the sound quality. For testing, I'll be using this Panasonic DMR EZ47V VHS, VCR, and DVD recorder combo unit. There are many of these VHS DVD combo units, but this is by far the most versatile one I've ever seen. The VCR has Super VHS quasi playback, which means it will play a Super VHS tape, but only at standard VHS quality. Right here on the front panel we have inputs for S-video, composite, and stereo audio. Over on this side is the DVD recorder, which does record as well as play, and it supports DVD RAM, which was sort of a Panasonic proprietary format, pretty much. Not many other companies supported it. It does have a built-in digital TV tuner, unlike most of these. Most of these drop the TV tuner once they are required to make it digital, but this one includes it. And under this drop-down door, we have a DV input for connecting a digital 8 or mini DV camcorder, and you can record that to DVD or VHS, and an SD card slot for viewing photos on your TV. I don't know if it supports any kind of video playback from SD. I haven't tried it. And just like the TV, this has all the video connections you could ever want, including analog RF on channel 3 or 4, HDMI, composite video, component video, S-video, and even a digital audio output, which you can see is active right now. And unlike most of these, all of these outputs work with VHS tapes, not just DVDs. So if you want to, you can play a VHS tape through component or S-video. And since my video about those crappy little portable black and white TVs is trending again, and it got so many positive comments about the test material I used to demonstrate them, which was this 1997 Volkswagen Jetta demonstration tape, I'll give you another sample from it.
A blinking red light warns others that your radio is coded and useless if removed. The light blinks whenever the ignition key is removed. If there should be a loss of power to your radio, well then you'll have to recode it. Simply push the mode and scan buttons simultaneously until 1000 appears on the display. Then use the first 4 station buttons to punch in the number on your radio code card. Now push the mode and scan buttons again until the word safe appears. Your radio's now coded and will work again.
You know, Peter, the tape we were listening to was kind of warm after I ejected it. Did you notice that?
Oh, well that's normal, Callie. See, the cassette player and your tape are fine.
Good, because I do like listening to this tape when I'm doing all the driving.
Hey, now wait a minute. Didn't we already go over this once?
Anyway, moving along.
Now I'll show some samples from the Ultimate DVD demo disc. So here's the DVD playing through RF output on channel 3. Now here is S-video. And here is progressive scan component output from the DVD player.
The thing about it was, why we used to love it was this line we thought was like really like far out. Sugar Bugger, it's getting late, because in England...
I know, I found out about it when I
That's,
came over in 64.
yeah.
That's when I met you guys.
Yeah,
And
Abbey
you-
Road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you were the one who told me, you said, hey, they had to bleep that
I
out.
said, great man, great, how did you dare do that? He said, what's wrong with it?
I know.
Sugar Bugger? He said, well that doesn't mean anything where I'm from.
It
We're
does.
saying, wow, you controversial fool, you.
You may wonder if this TV can display high-definition video signals through its component video input, even though it's not an HD TV, because I believe some of these kind of TVs can. They will automatically downscale it to the resolution of the TV, but unfortunately this one does not. Right now I have it connected to a very rare Hitachi Blu-ray disc camcorder, which has a component video output, which you can switch between 480i and 1080i. Right now, as you can see, it's set to 480i, and that displays fine. But if I go into the menu here and switch it to high definition, which is 1080i, and tell it to use the component output and set it, we just get a blue screen on the TV because it cannot display that kind of video signal. But it does support PAL, because right now I have it connected to my Sony Mavica, whose video output is switchable between NTSC and PAL. And if I switch it to PAL, The TV goes blank for a couple seconds, but then now we're displaying a PAL video signal in full color. So this is a multi-system display. Which makes sense because PAL has 576 visible scan lines, so if you add a little bit extra for overscan, it would fit perfectly on this 800 by 600 resolution LCD panel.
A charter flight carrying the London Symphony Orchestra has been forced to jettison some of the musical instruments.
I don't think it's supposed to look like that. Yeah, once in a while it doesn't quite lock onto the video signal correctly, but switching it to a different input and then back to the video input should fix that. No, it didn't. What's going on? Maybe I have to power cycle this thing. Turn it off. Turn it back on. That changed it a little bit, but it's still weird. What's going on with this thing? Okay, I power cycled the Sega Genesis and that fixed it. So, must have been something weird with the video output of the game console that I didn't like, even after power cycling. But switching the console on and off rather than the TV fixed it. So, I don't know what was going on with that. But my point of this setup is to check the amount of lag that the LCD TV has compared to a CRT, and it's about 1 frame behind the CRT. So the lag is just about enough to be noticeable, but probably not bad enough to spoil your gameplay. You can tell by the audio that there is minimal lag because you don't hear an echo with both the LCD and CRT playing at the same time. Remember when TV station graphics used to look like this?
The preceding program was paid for by Sinovision Incorporated. It comes to you from Channel 30.
Now I'm testing of my Tandy 1000's composite video output. I know 80 column mode is going to be illegible, so I pressed F2 during the memory check, which puts it into what it calls TV mode, which is 40 columns, composite color, and 200 scan lines instead of 225. And obviously some of these DOS utilities are not formatted for a 40 column screen, but once it boots up and I have my custom colors loaded, it looks very nice. But one thing I noticed is that the high intensity colors are a little bit washed out, and that's not just a camera effect, because you can see I have both the brightness and contrast turned all the way down, and it still looks a bit washed out on this TV. But otherwise, for CGA composite color, it works fine. And even 80 column text mode is perfectly legible as long as you turn off the color burst. If you leave it in color mode in 80 column mode, it's almost completely illegible, but in black and white 80 column CGA composite output, it looks perfectly fine, nice and sharp. For comparison, here is that same exact screen in color composite 80 column mode on CGA, and yeah, it's total Smiro vision. So if you want legible text in color with CGA, you have to stick to 40 column mode.
No. The little pegs. See the little pegs?
No. Like this?
Yes! Maybe it didn't work. I thought for sure it was supposed to go like that. That's good. Let's go.
Now here is testing out the VGA input with my Tandy 1000 RLX. First in standard DOS text mode, which generally works pretty well, except once I load something that's full screen, it doesn't quite fill the entire screen of the TV. And that's not a matter of it not being adjusted correctly, because if I go into the menu and do auto adjust, see, it just scoots it over to the side, and there's no control to adjust the horizontal width. I can adjust the position so I can move it more back towards the center, but that's as much as you're going to get width-wise with DOS text mode. Once you load up something that is in VGA resolution, 640 by 480, it does fill up the entire screen.
Welcome to DeskMate. For help at any time, press the key labeled F1.
And for playing DOS games that use the lower resolutions like 320 by 200, again, they don't quite fill up the entire screen, but otherwise they look fine. Same thing with 640 by 200, but the EGA mode of 640 by 350 gets cut off on the side. But if you go into the menu and adjust the horizontal position back to 0, it does fit the screen horizontally. But again, absolutely no problem with 640 by 480 VGA mode. Yes, it is upscaling it to 800 by 600, so it's not a pixel perfect output, but for just testing and casual use, it's perfectly fine. And if you shut off the computer when using the VGA input, it goes into a 7-second standby mode where it gives you a couple seconds, and then if it doesn't receive any video signal in that time, then it shuts off. But as soon as you turn the computer back on, the TV will come back on. So that's pretty nice. Now here it is connected to a more modern PC. This is my U310 keyboard PC, and sometimes it does that really weird thing you just saw when it's starting up and it's switching between the BIOS post screen and the Windows XP startup screen. Doesn't do that every time, but sometimes it does. But once you get into Windows and you're running at the native resolution of the TV, 800 by 600, it looks perfectly fine. And I can actually bump it up to 1024 by 768. But of course, the TV is not physically displaying this. It's scaling it down to 800 by 600, so it looks kind of grainy. So I'll go back down to 800 by 600. Which looks a lot better. It does support higher refresh rates, up to 75 Hertz, but I don't really see a point to it because I'm not playing games on this, so I'm just going to leave it at 60 Hertz. And that's where it's going to stay. And now if I go into DOS text mode, again, it doesn't quite fill up the entire screen, but otherwise it works fine. These days, there are not many websites that are formatted for 800 by 600, with the exception of my own website, amstereo.org, which, as you can see, fits perfectly. And if anyone wants to use this website when they're testing old computers with old web browsers, it should work with anything since like Netscape 3. So pretty much any web browser you can throw at it, it should be able to display properly.
Who's the coach?
Yes!
That's Jack. Loves baseball and Hawaiian shirts. Shakespeare fan, huh? Classically trained.
Another question I'm sure some people will ask is, does this TV support 15 kilohertz RGB video through the VGA input, such as from an Amiga computer, an Atari ST, a Tandy Color Computer 3, or in this case an Apple II GS? And unfortunately the answer is no. According to the specifications, the minimum horizontal frequency for the VGA input is 30 kilohertz. So in order to use it with one of these computers, you would need to use a scan doubler, or what is also called a flicker fixer. At least the 2GS's composite video output works fine with this TV in all its rainbow streaked glory. And if you want to see something amazing, this Apple II GS still has its original Varta battery, has a date code of July 1988. It still has not leaked at all, and it still works. It's putting out 3 volts. At least for you Commodore 64 fans out there, it works fine with an adapter to convert Luma Chroma to S-Video, as you can see right now. I guess you could say this TV is a jack of all trades, master of none, because it has many different inputs and features, but they all have their quirks. But for my purposes, I'm not looking for perfect. I just want something functional that I can connect to almost any kind of video source, whether it be a camcorder, a VCR, a video game console, an old computer, a more modern computer. All these different inputs come in very handy for my purposes. And I have just the right stand for it. This was another thrift store find. It was in the original box, never assembled, although it had been sitting for a long time in a damp condition, so the box was almost completely destroyed. And the middle stands are rusting, so I had to scrape the rust off and repaint them. But this is a Tandy 1000 monitor stand designed for their 1000HX or 1000EX computers, but almost any little computer will fit underneath it. Or something like this U310 keyboard PC would also fit neatly under there. So that's going to be my monitor stand for this TV. So here's why I like this TV. I have my top loader Nintendo connected to the RF input, my Sony Hi8 Handycam connected to the S-Video input, my Tandy 1000 connected to the composite input, my DVD player connected to the component video input, and my U310 keyboard PC connected to the VGA input. So that makes it very useful for the kind of equipment I work with and the kind of setup I want to have, which will make it very convenient for the kinds of videos I make.